Hey guys, tonight we're taking a journey to a place and time where the lines between celebration, sickness, and madness became terrifyingly blurred. We're heading to the city of Strasbourg in the heart of the Holy Roman Empire, in the sweltering summer of 1518. Imagine a bustling medieval street, full of merchants and craftsmen. Now imagine one person in that street begins to dance, not with joy, but with a frantic, desperate, and unstoppable compulsion. Then another person joins them, and another, until hundreds of people are dancing, day after day, unable to stop. Their bodies racked with exhaustion, their minds seemingly gone. Tonight's story is about the awful, bizarre, and still unexplained reality of the dancing plague of 1518. And let's be honest, you probably wouldn't have survived life in 1518 in the first place. Forget the mysterious dancing mania. You likely would have been taken out by a minor tooth infection, a questionable street meat pie, or simply the profound lack of basic sanitation. The number of ways to randomly die in the 16th century was truly, breathtakingly impressive. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. It's a quiet and simple way to support the channel. And while you're at it, I'd love to see where and when you're tuning in from. Go ahead and drop your city and local time in the comments. It's always a little fascinating to see our community of history lovers spread across the globe. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your world is a world of books, bottles, and the complex. Fragrant smells of the earth. You are an apprentice to a man named Dr. Magnus, one of the most respected physicians in the free imperial city of Strasbourg. Your life is one of quiet study, long hours, and the often less than glamorous work of grinding herbs, cleaning instruments, and trying to decipher your master's spidery, Latin-scrawled handwriting. The city of Strasbourg in the year 1518 is a proud and prosperous place. As a free imperial city, it answers only to the distant Holy Roman Emperor, giving it a fierce independence and a swaggering sense of its own importance. It is a hub of commerce, situated on the great trade routes of Europe. Its streets are a bustling, noisy, and crowded warren of half-timbered houses. The workshops of its powerful guilds, the tanners, the butchers, the weavers filling the air with the sounds and smells of industry. At the heart of it all stands the great cathedral, its single magnificent spire soaring into the sky, a testament to the city's wealth and its piety. But beneath this veneer of prosperity, the city is a place of deep and simmering anxiety. The past few years have been hard. A series of brutally cold winters and wet summers have led to failed harvests. A great famine has stalked the land, and the city is now filled with the starving poor from the surrounding countryside. Their gaunt, desperate faces a constant, unsettling presence in the marketplaces. Disease, too, is a familiar neighbor. You have seen outbreaks of the sweating sickness, of leprosy, of smallpox. The fear of pestilence is a low, constant hum beneath the surface of daily life, and there is a new kind of anxiety in the air, a spiritual one. Just last year, a rebellious German monk named Martin Luther nailed a list of his grievances to a church door in a town called Wittenberg. The tremors of his act of defiance are just beginning to be felt here in Strasbourg. The solid, unquestioned authority of the church is being challenged, and people are filled with a new, fervent, and often fearful piety. This is the great academic debate of your time. What is the true cause of this undercurrent of dread? Is it the hunger in people's bellies, the fear of disease in their blood, or the new, unsettling doubt in their souls? You suspect it is all three. A poisonous stew of anxieties simmering in the hot summer air. Your life, however, is one of order and science. You are an apprentice to a physician, a man of learning. Your world is governed not by superstition, but by the elegant, rational, and ancient science of the four humors. The medical doctrine passed down from the great Hippocrates and Galen. Every sickness, you are taught, is an imbalance of these humors in the body. Your master's job is to identify the imbalance and to prescribe a treatment that will restore the patient to a state of equilibrium. A key part of your own training involves the practice of uroscopy. It is one of your primary daily tasks. The servants of your master's wealthy patients arrive each morning bearing small glass flasks containing their master's or mistress's urine. Your job is to take these flasks and examine them with the gravity of a soothsayer, reading the future in a crystal ball. This is a strange and obscure, yet central part of your medical world. You hold the flask up to the light. Studying its color against a detailed wheel-like chart, is it a pale, straw-colored yellow, a sign of a healthy balance, or is it a dark, reddish-brown, suggesting an excess of choler, of hot blood? You observe the sediment. Is it cloudy? Is there a foam you might even, in some cases? Unstopper the flask and note the smell. Your master, Dr. Magnus, with his years of experience, can or claims he can diagnose everything from a fever to a melancholy spirit simply by looking at a man's water. You're pretty sure he's mostly just making educated guesses, but he does it with such profound and unshakable authority that his patients are always deeply impressed. The rest of your day is spent in the laboratory at the back of the house, a room that smells powerfully of dried herbs and strange chemicals. You spend hours with a heavy mortar and pestle, grinding ingredients for your master's prescriptions. You grind willow bark for fevers, senna pods for constipation, and dried poppy heads for a potent, pain-relieving syrup. Your master's clientele is wealthy. The guild masters, the city councilors, the rich merchants. Their ailments are often as much of the spirit as of the body. A prosperous butcher's wife comes, complaining of a deep sadness, a melancholy. Dr. Magnus diagnoses an excess of cold. Dry black bile. The cure he prescribes is both medical and philosophical. He gives her a lecture on the importance of a cheerful disposition, and he sends you to prepare a very expensive potion containing a small amount of powdered pearl and a scraping of lapis lazuli, both believed to have properties that could lighten the spirit. It's a remedy that is more expensive than it is effective. But for the wealthy, that is often the point. You learn the craft, you read the great texts, you memorize the properties of hundreds of plants. You are becoming a man of science. You believe in the ordered, logical, cause and effect world that your master has taught you. You believe that for every ailment, there is a rational explanation and a corresponding cure. Your world makes sense. It is the middle of July. The heat is oppressive, blanketing the city in a thick, humid haze. The tension in the streets is a palpable thing. The city feels like a tightly coiled spring, a string on a lute that has been pulled too taut. It feels like it is waiting for something to happen. You are in your master's study, a cool, dark room lined with books. You are carefully grinding dried valerian root, its strange, earthy smell filling the air. It is a quiet, meditative task. The rhythmic scrape and thump of your pestle is a small, orderly sound in a world that feels increasingly disordered. And then you hear it, a sound from the street outside. It is not the usual sound of market chatter or the rumble of a cart. It is a strange, rhythmic sound, a shuffling, scraping sound, a sound of frantic, unending motion. Dr. Magnus looks up from his books, annoyed by the disturbance. He sends you to the window to see what the commotion is. You open the heavy wooden shutters and you look down into the narrow, sun-baked street, and you see her. It is a single woman. Her name, you will later learn, is Frau Trophea. She is standing in the middle of the street, under the full, brutal heat of the July sun, and she is dancing. It is not a dance of joy. There is no music. Her face is blank. Her eyes are staring at something far away, but her body is in constant, frantic motion. She twirls, she jigs, She hops from foot to foot. Her arms flail, her movements are jerky, convulsive, and utterly, completely, ceaselessly relentless. She is not dancing. It is more like the dance is dancing her. A small crowd of your neighbors has gathered to watch. Their faces a mixture of amusement, pity, and confusion. They think she is drunk or mad, but you, from your physician's window, see something else. You see a woman whose body is no longer her own. You see a person who has become a puppet. Her strings being pulled by some unseen, unknown force. It is a bizarre and unsettling spectacle, but it is just one mad woman on one hot summer afternoon. Surely it is nothing more. You close the shutters. You return to your work, to the familiar, comforting rhythm of your mortar and pestle, but you cannot shake the image of the woman in the street, or the sound of her endlessly shuffling, scraping, dancing feet. It is a sound that does not belong in your ordered, rational world. It is the sound of a spring that has finally, inexplicably, snapped. The sound of Frau Trofea's dancing feet on the hot cobblestones becomes the new, unsettling rhythm of your street. What begins as a public curiosity, a strange and momentary diversion for a bored crowd, soon morphs into something far more disturbing. The woman does not stop. You and your master, Dr. Magnus, spend much of the afternoon observing her from the second-floor window of your study. The initial amusement of the onlookers in the street below begins to fade, replaced by a kind of fascinated unease. Children who were at first imitating her jerky movements are shushed and pulled back by their mothers. The woman is clearly not performing for the crowd, and her eyes are vacant, staring at some middle distance that no one else can see. Her face is a blank mask, beaded with sweat, her expression devoid of joy, of anger, of anything but a kind of profound, internal concentration, a mania. Dr. Magnus mutters beside you. Stroking his well-trimmed beard, he is professionally intrigued, a scientist observing a new and baffling natural phenomenon, a clear case of an overheated humor. The blood is too hot, too agitated. It is boiling in her veins and forcing the limbs into this unnatural motion. His diagnosis is confident, rooted in the logical, ordered world of the four humors. To him, this is not a supernatural event. It is a medical problem, an imbalance that can be corrected once the patient is brought to him and subjected to the proper treatments of cooling herbs and, if necessary, bleeding. But the patient cannot be brought to him. She is lost in the prison of her own body. Her husband arrives in the late afternoon. He is a stout, bewildered man named Herr Trofea, and his face is a mask of shame and confusion. You watch as he tries to reason with her. He pleads with her. His voice a low, urgent rumble. She does not seem to hear him. He gently takes her by the arm, trying to guide her back towards their home. But her body resists, continuing its frantic, convulsive jig. Her arms flailing, her feet shuffling and stomping on the stones. It is like trying to reason with a thunderstorm. He tries to physically restrain her, to hold her still, but her movements are too strong, too erratic. She is a puppet, and he cannot find the strings. Defeated and humiliated, he retreats, leaving his wife to her terrible public dance. She dances as the sun begins to set, her shadow growing long and distorted on the cobblestones. She dances as the last light fades and the lamps are lit in the windows of the surrounding houses. The crowd has thinned, the spectacle having lost its novelty and taken on a more sinister, frightening quality. But she does not stop. She does not rest. She does not eat. She does not drink. You go to your own bed that night, but you can still hear her. The faint, relentless scrape, shuffle, stomp of her shoes on the street below is a maddening, sleepless rhythm. It is the sound of a human clock that cannot be wound down. The next day, she is still there. And the day after that. Her endurance is superhuman and horrifying. Her physical condition deteriorates before your very eyes. Her fine linen dress is soaked with sweat and stained with grime. Her face is gaunt and drawn. Her lips cracked and dry from dehydration. Her shoes have been worn through, and now the soles of her bare feet are a raw, bleeding mess. But she does not stop. The engine of her mania is more powerful than the failings of her own flesh. The mood of the city begins to notice her. She is no longer just a neighborhood curiosity. She is becoming a legend, a story whispered in the marketplaces and the taverns. Who is she, Frau Trophäa? They say, but she is becoming more than a person. She is becoming a symbol of a deep, underlying anxiety in the city. Some whisper that she is possessed by a demon, that her convulsive dance is the work of an infernal power. Others, more pious, declare it a divine punishment, the wrath of a saint she has somehow offended. You, as a man of science, dismiss these superstitions, but as you watch her tireless, unnatural movements, even you must admit that it feels like you are witnessing something beyond the realm of normal human sickness. The historical records from your time are clear on this point. Frau Trophäa, a real person, did indeed dance, alone, in the streets of Strasbourg for nearly a week. It is a fact so bizarre that it seems like a folk tale, but it is a well-documented beginning to a bizarre and terrifying chapter in your city's history. By the fourth day, the city authorities can no longer ignore the situation. The spectacle of a woman dancing herself to death in the middle of a public street is a profound disruption to the civic order. The craft guilds, the powerful men who run the city, become involved, a delegation of them. Their faces grim and self-important, arrives at your master's door. They have come for an official consultation. You show them into your master's study. They are large, well-fed men. Their fine woolen robes a stark contrast to the ragged, suffering woman in the street outside. They demand an explanation from Dr. Magnus. What is the nature of this affliction? Doctor, the head of the Butchers' Guild, asks. His voice a self-important boom. Is it a sickness? Is it witchcraft? Dr. Magnus is in his element. He is calm, authoritative, a beacon of reason in a sea of confusion. He explains his theory of the hot blood. It is a natural ailment. Gentlemen, he says, his voice smooth and reassuring. Not a supernatural one. Her blood has become overheated, likely due to the choleric passions. This causes a mania, a delirium, which manifests in this incessant motion. It is a fever of the limbs. And the cure, a city councilor asks. The cure, Dr. Magnus says, pausing for dramatic effect, is simple. The fever must be allowed to burn itself out. She has a disease of dancing. Therefore, she must be made to dance. We must encourage the motion, not suppress it. She must dance until the fever breaks, until the overheated humor has been expelled from her body through the exhaustion of her limbs. The logic is, to the 16th century mind, impeccable. It is based on the trusted, ancient principles of humoral theory. The guildsmen nod, their faces full of a new understanding. They are practical men, and this is a practical-sounding solution. It is certainly better than the alternative explanation of demonic possession. They thank your master for his wisdom, and they leave, their minds now set on a course of action. You, the apprentice, watch them go, and you feel a sense of pride in your master's learning, in his ability to impose a rational scientific explanation on this chaotic and frightening event. But as you look out the window again at the pathetic, stumbling, bleeding figure of Frau Trophäa, a small, cold seed of doubt begins to sprout in your mind. To cure a fever of dancing with more dancing, it seems logical. Yes, but it also seems, in a strange way, Completely mad, the first week of the ordeal comes to an end. Frau Trophäa is still dancing. She is a wreck, a ghost, a barely human creature of perpetual, agonizing motion. Her husband has tried to bring her food and water, but she cannot stop moving long enough to take any. She is clearly beginning to fail. Her movements are slower, more stumbling. It seems that she will simply collapse and die in the street. But then, on the seventh day, something new happens. You are watching from your window, as you now do every hour, and you see it. A second woman, a neighbor who had been a part of the crowd watching Frau Trophäa, suddenly begins to twitch. Her arms begin to jerk. Her feet begin to shuffle in the same frantic rhythm. And then she too is dancing, her face taking on the same blank, vacant expression as Frau Trophäa's. A gasp of horror ripples through the crowd. A few hours later, another joins in. A teenage boy, then another woman. They do not seem to be imitating. They seem to have been seized by the same invisible force. The same internal puppet master. They are not dancing with Frau Trophäa. They are dancing like her. You stare, your heart pounding. You feel the world shifting under your feet. This is not the personal, isolated mania of a single, unfortunate woman. This is not a simple case of overheated blood. This is a contagion. The sickness is spreading. And it is a sickness of the mind, a fever of motion, a plague of dancing, and it is just beginning. The sight of the second woman beginning to dance, then the third, then the fourth, transforms the bizarre spectacle on the streets of Strasbourg into a full-blown crisis. The contagion of motion, an idea that would have seemed insane just a day before, is now an undeniable reality. This is not a private madness, it is a public pestilence, panic. A far more familiar and understandable contagion begins to ripple through the city. The crowd that had once gathered to watch Frau Trophäa now shrinks away from the growing cluster of dancers. Their faces pale with a new, superstitious terror. They make the sign against the evil eye. They hurry their children indoors and bar their shutters. The street, which had been a theater, is now a quarantined zone. Isolated by a wall of fear, within a week. The number of dancers grows from a handful to more than 30. By the end of the month, as the summer heat continues to bake the city, that number will swell to over 400. This is the historical fact of your bizarre plague. It spread with the terrifying efficiency of a real disease. An epidemic of frantic, joyless movement. The phenomenon is as baffling as it is frightening. It seems to primarily affect women. Though men and even some children are soon swept up in the mania, there is no discernible pattern to their convulsions. You watch from your study window as the group writhes in the street below. Each person is lost in their own private hell of motion. One woman twirls endlessly on the spot until she collapses from dizziness, only to rise and begin twirling again. A man jigs violently, his limbs flailing as if he is being electrocuted. A young girl simply hops from one foot to the other, a monotonous, endless rhythm of desperation. They are a silent, unchoreographed orchestra of suffering, each playing their own terrible instrument. You and your master, Dr. Magnus, are at a loss. The neat, ordered world of your medical textbooks has no category for this. Your master's initial diagnosis of a simple case of hot blood in a single woman seems woefully inadequate to explain this spreading plague. You spend the long evenings in his library, poring over your books, searching for an explanation. Could it be a poison? You consider the city's food supply? Perhaps a contaminated batch of flour from one of the mills. Consider the rye bread. You suggest to your master one evening, we know that rye, when it becomes damp and grows the purple-black ergot fungus, can cause a sickness of the body, convulsions, burning sensations, gangrene of the limbs. Could this be a different form of that sickness? One that affects the mind instead of the body? You are, without knowing it, stumbling upon a theory that historians and scientists will debate for centuries. The theory of ergotism. The idea that the dancing plague was caused by the ingestion of bread made from ergot-infected rye. It's psychoactive alkaloids causing severe muscle spasms and hallucinations. It's a compelling theory, one that offers a physical, biological explanation for the madness. But your master shakes his head. The ergot sickness. The St. Anthony's fire has known symptoms, he says. His voice heavy with the weight of his own learning. The convulsions it causes are not a coordinated, dance-like motion, and it does not spread from person to person in this manner. No, this is not a poison in the bread. This is a poison in the spirit, a vapor in the blood. You are forced to agree. As you watch the phenomenon from your window, you see things that a simple poisoning cannot explain. You see how it seems to spread not through a shared meal, but by sight. You watch a woman on the edge of the crowd of onlookers, her face a mask of horrified fascination. You see her begin to tremble, to twitch in sympathy with the dancers. And then, with a cry of despair, she is seized by the mania herself, her body beginning its own frantic, involuntary jig as she is drawn into the writhing mass. It is as if the very sight of the dancing is the agent of transmission, a sickness that spreads through the eyes and into the soul. This is the terrifying, modern explanation that you are circling around but do not have the words for a mass psychogenic illness. A hysterical contagion, born of the immense, underlying psychological stress of the city's populace. Your city, you realize, is a tinderbox of anxiety, and the dancing of Frau Trofea was simply the spark that has set it all ablaze. The city government is now in a state of full-blown panic. The powerful guilds and the city council cannot abide this level of public disorder. It is bad for business, it is bad for the city's reputation, and it is terrifying. They need a solution, and so they turn again to the only authority they have. Your master, Dr. Magnus, the voice of science and reason. You accompany him to a meeting at the city's great guild hall. The room is filled with the most powerful men in Strasbourg, the guild masters. The magistrates, their faces grim, their fine robes a stark contrast to the ragged. Dancing figures that now occupy their streets. They look to your master with desperate, pleading eyes. Doctor, the chief magistrate says, you have told us this is a natural disease, but it is spreading like a pestilence. What are we to do? Should we lock these people away? Should we call the priest to perform an exorcism? Dr. Magnus stands before them. A pillar of calm, academic certainty in a world that has lost its mind. He is a man who trusts his theories, who believes in the ancient wisdom of his books, and he has come to a conclusion. He dismisses the idea of a supernatural cause. This is not a curse from a saint, nor is it the work of demons, he announces. His voice firm. To believe so is to fall into peasant superstition. It is, as I first diagnosed, a natural malady, an affliction of hot blood. The fact that it is spreading is simply a sign that the conditions that cause it the heat of the summer. The choleric passions of the populace are widespread. We are not facing a spiritual contagion, but an epidemic of natural. Medical causes. The magistrates seem relieved. A medical problem is a problem that can be solved. A curse is not. And your recommended cure, Doctor, the magistrate asks. Your master takes a deep breath. He is about to double down on his initial, disastrous advice. But this time, he will present it as a citywide public health initiative. The cure, he says, with the unshakable confidence of a man who is about to make a catastrophic error, is not to restrain the dancers. To do so would be to trap the overheated humor within their bodies, which could drive it to their vital organs and kill them. No, we must do the opposite. We must encourage the dancing. A murmur of confusion ripples through the hall. We must facilitate it, he continues, his voice rising with enthusiasm for his own terrible idea. We must provide the dancers with a space to dance, day and night. We must help them to exhaust themselves, to dance the fever out of their blood, to sweat out the poison. We must, gentlemen, organize the dance. The plan he lays out is audacious. He advises the council to clear out one of the large guild halls, a place where the dancers can be gathered together. He tells them to clear a space in the open-air grain market. He even suggests that they hire musicians, drummers and pipers, to provide a steady rhythm, to encourage the dancers and to help them focus their frantic energy. His thinking is that if they can turn this chaotic, convulsive twitching into a more ordered, rhythmic dance, the body will be able to heal itself more efficiently. The city council, desperate for any course of action that seems logical and scientific, agrees. They are men of order, and this is a plan that promises to take a chaotic, frightening spectacle and put it into an organized, manageable framework. They place their faith entirely in the wisdom of your master. You stand behind him, a silent apprentice, and you feel a profound sense of dread. You look at the confident, determined faces of the city fathers, and you look at the serene, academic certainty on your master's face, and you are perhaps the only person in the room who thinks that this is a terrible, catastrophic idea. You are about to treat a fire not with water, but with a great, bellows-fanned supply of fresh, dry kindling. The next day, the city's decrees are posted. The dancing sickness is to be treated as a medical ailment. The afflicted are not to be harmed or restrained, but are to be helped in their healing. And you watch with a growing sense of horror as a group of workmen arrives in the grain market, just outside your window. They are carrying stacks of fresh pine timber, and hammers and nails. They begin their work, following the orders of the city council, which were based on the expert medical advice of your own master. They begin to construct a large, raised wooden platform. They are building a stage for the dancing plague. And you know, with a terrible, sinking certainty, that you are about to become a witness to a cure that is going to be far worse than the disease. The city of Strasbourg, in its wisdom, decides to fight fire with fire. Your master, Dr. Magnus, the most respected physician in the city, has given his diagnosis. This strange, spreading affliction is a natural disease caused by hot blood, and the cure. He has declared with the unshakable confidence of a man who has read many books, is to let the fever burn itself out. The people have a sickness of dancing. Therefore, they must be encouraged to dance. You, the apprentice, are horrified by this prescription. It feels in a deep, intuitive way, profoundly wrong. But you are an apprentice. Your job is not to question, but to observe and to learn. And so you watch as the full, organized, and catastrophically misguided power of a 16th century city is brought to bear on this bizarre public health crisis. The first step is to consolidate the chaos. The city guards, their faces a mixture of fear and embarrassment, are given their strange new orders. They move through the streets, not to arrest the dancers or to restrain them, but to gently, firmly, herd them towards designated areas. The dozens of individual, spontaneous dancers who have been twitching and flailing in the alleyways and side streets are now guided. Like a strange, convulsive flock of sheep, towards the city's grain market. The workmen have finished their job, in the center of the market square, where sacks of wheat and rye were once sold. There now stands a large, hastily constructed wooden stage. It is a crude, ugly thing, but its purpose is clear. It is a dance floor for the damned. The second part of your master's prescription is also implemented. The city guilds, in a gesture of civic responsibility, have hired musicians. They are not the cheerful minstrels who play for weddings and feasts. They are drummers and pipers, men hired to provide not a melody, but a relentless, monotonous, and hypnotic beat. They set up at the edge of the stage, and they begin to play. Thump, thump, thump goes the drum. Wee, wee, wee goes the pipe. It is a sound without joy, without art. It is a functional sound, a mechanical sound. the sound of a factory that has been built to produce exhaustion. It is the soundtrack to a city-sponsored nervous breakdown. The scene in the grain market becomes the most popular and most terrifying spectacle in Strasbourg. The dancers, now numbering over 100, are on the stage. Their bodies moving in a great, writhing, unchoreographed mass. The relentless beat of the musicians seems to drive them on, to fuel their mania. The healthy citizens of Strasbourg gather to watch. They stand in silent, horrified awe, as if watching a religious rite from some strange and terrible foreign land. Your master, Dr. Magnus, is in his element. He is a man of science, and this is his great public experiment. He walks among the city magistrates who have gathered to observe, explaining the process with the calm, detached air of a professor giving a lecture. You see, he says, pointing a confident finger at the writhing mass on the stage, we are giving the morbid humor an outlet. We are allowing the excess heat in their blood to be expelled through vigorous, continuous motion. Their sweat is the poison leaving the body. It is a difficult cure, but it is the correct one. The magistrates nod, impressed by his scientific certainty. They are men of action, and they are relieved to be taking action. Any action, no matter how bizarre. They are grappling with a crisis that defies all logic, and your master has given them a logical-seeming framework to understand it. This is a question that future historians will debate. Was this strange and terrible cure a purely medical decision, born of a genuine, if spectacularly flawed, scientific theory? Or was it also an act of social control, a way for the city's authorities to manage a chaotic and frightening public spectacle by containing it, by giving it a stage, a schedule, and a soundtrack, by turning a random, terrifying phenomenon into an organized, observable, and managed event? They have created the illusion of being in control, but you, watching from the crowd, see the truth. You're not watching a cure, you're watching an atrocity. You focus on the individuals on the stage. You see Frau Trophea, the woman who started it all. She is barely recognizable now. She is a gaunt, skeletal figure, her clothes in tatters, her bare feet a bloody pulp. Her movements are no longer a frantic jig. They are a slow, stumbling, agonizing shuffle. She is a marathon runner who has long since passed the point of exhaustion and is now simply being kept in motion by a force beyond her control. You see the others. Their faces are vacant, their eyes staring, unseeing. Their bodies are slick with sweat. They're breathing a ragged, desperate gasp. They do not interact with each other. Each is lost in their own private, kinetic hell. Some have begun to cry out, their voices hoarse, their cries not of pain, but of a desperate, frustrated plea for their own bodies to simply stop. But the music does not stop. The drummers, paid by the hour, keep up their relentless, monotonous beat. They are the engine of this terrible machine. It's a difficult job. You imagine, it's hard to maintain your artistic integrity when your primary role is to provide a rhythm for a mass public breakdown. As the days wear on, the city doubles down on the cure. The main guild hall of the tanners is cleared of its benches and tables and is turned into a second indoor dancing hall for when the summer rains come, or for when the dancers collapse and need to be dragged off the main stage. Healthy citizens are encouraged to join in the dancing for short periods, to offer support and encouragement to the afflicted. Though few take up the offer, it is one thing to watch the spectacle, it is another thing to join it. Your own work as an apprentice now involves preparing special remedies for the dancers, not to stop their dancing, but to support it. Your master has you mixing strengthening cordials and tonics made with wine and expensive spices. You prepare poultices for their bleeding. Battered feet? You are no longer trying to cure their sickness. You are merely providing maintenance for the victims of the cure. The city of Strasbourg has, in its scientific wisdom, created a perpetual motion machine of human suffering. The first death occurs at the end of the first week of the organized dancing. It is not Frau Trophea, whose endurance seems almost supernatural. It is another woman, one who had joined the dance a few days after it began. You are standing in the crowded square, watching the stage. When you see her falter, she is in the center of the writhing mass. Her movements, which had been frantic, become slow and clumsy. She stumbles. She tries to catch her balance, and then, with a quiet sigh, she simply collapses onto the wooden planks of the stage. The music stops for a moment. A wave of shock and silence washes over the crowd of onlookers. On the stage, the other dancers, lost in their own worlds, barely seem to notice. They simply dance around her fallen body, their feet shuffling and stomping just inches from her head. Dr. Magnus and the city officials rush onto the stage. They kneel beside her, but it is too late. Her face is a pale, bluish color. She is not breathing. Her heart, pushed beyond its absolute limit by days of non-stop. Frantic exertion in the brutal summer heat has simply given out. She has died of exhaustion. She has been danced to death. The body is quickly and discreetly carried away. The drummer, after a moment of hesitation, is ordered to begin his beat again. The dance must go on. The cure must be seen through to its end. But you have seen the truth. You look at your master, Dr. Magnus, as he comes down from the stage, his face for the first time showing a flicker of doubt, of uncertainty. He avoids your gaze. You realize, with a clarity that is as cold and as sharp as a surgeon's knife, that you are not witnessing a medical treatment. You are witnessing a state-sanctioned, medically approved slaughter. The city, in its desperate attempt to impose a rational order on an irrational plague, has created a cure that is infinitely more deadly than the disease itself. And your master, the great man of science and reason, is its chief architect. The stage he has built has become an altar, and the dancers are the human sacrifices. The death of the woman on the stage is a discordant note in the grim symphony your city has orchestrated. But it does not stop the music. You expect the city magistrates to be horrified, to call an immediate halt to this catastrophic cure, but they do not. They turn to your master, Dr. Magnus, for reassurance, and he, a man now fully committed to the fortress of his own theory, provides it an unfortunate case. You hear him tell the chief magistrate, his voice filled with a false, scientific gravity. The woman's heart was clearly weak. Her humor's already too corrupted. It is a tragedy, but it does not invalidate the treatment. The poison must be expelled. The dance must continue. His professional reputation is now inextricably linked to this public experiment. To admit failure would be to admit his own ignorance, to shatter his standing as the city's preeminent physician. And so, the calamitous cure proceeds. The stage in the grain market and the cleared-out guild halls become killing floors. The initial death is not an anomaly. It is a precedent. The next day, 2 more dancers collapse and die. The day after that, 5. The death toll begins to climb with a terrifying, inexorable logic. The historical records of your city will later confirm that at the peak of this madness. As many as 15 people were dying each day. They are dying from heart attacks, from strokes, from pure, unrelenting physical exhaustion. Your job as a physician's apprentice is now a waking nightmare. You are no longer preparing poultices and tonics to aid the dancers. You are now tasked with pronouncing them dead. You and your master are summoned to the stage multiple times a day. You push your way through the still dancing. Oblivious bodies, to kneel over the crumpled form of a man or a woman who has finally found stillness. You check for breath, you feel for a pulse, and you nod to the city guards, who unceremoniously haul the body from the stage to a waiting cart. You are not just a witness to the failure of your master's cure, you are its official coroner. The injuries among those who do not die are horrific. You see people whose feet, after days of non-stop friction on the rough wooden planks, have been worn down to raw, bleeding flesh and bone. They continue to hop and shuffle on these ruined stumps. Propelled by a force that has completely overridden the body's instinct for self-preservation. You see others fall and break their arms or their legs, only to lie on the stage, their limbs twisted at unnatural angles. Still twitching and jerking to the relentless beat of the drum, the musicians, the men hired to provide the healing rhythm, are now participants in a horror show. They are pale-faced and haunted. The piper's melodies falter, their notes sour and discordant. The drummer's beats become a slow, reluctant, and funereal dirge. This is no longer a performance. It is an execution, and they are providing the soundtrack. Several of them quit, forfeiting their pay, unable to continue their role in this medically sanctioned massacre. The city has to hire mercenaries and drunkards from the city's taverns to take their places. Men whose only qualification is a willingness to keep a beat while the world around them goes mad. Your master, Dr. Magnus, begins to unravel. He's calm. Academic confidence dissolves into a frantic, defensive mania. He spends all his days at the dancing sites, striding back and forth, his face flushed, his eyes wild. He shouts encouragement at the dancers. More vigor, he cries, "Expel the putrid humors, dance for your lives." He is like a mad general, urging his decimated troops into one final suicidal charge. He is no longer observing his experiment. He is trying to will it to be true, to bend reality to fit his flawed theory through sheer force of personality. One evening, you confront him in his study. You cannot remain silent any longer. "Master," you say, your voice trembling with a mixture of fear and righteous anger. "You must see that this is not working. You are killing these people. The death toll rises every day. This is not a cure. It is a slaughter." He turns on you, his face contorted with a rage born of shame and denial. "You are an apprentice. What do you know of the great art?" he shouts. "You see only the surface. I see the great battle of the humors within. This is a necessary purging. A few weak vessels may break. But the method is sound. It is based on the wisdom of Galen himself. You look at the man who was once your mentor, your idol, the great man of reason, and you see only a frightened, arrogant fool. A man so blinded by his own pride that he would rather see hundreds of people die than admit that he was wrong. This becomes the great, unspoken question that hangs over the city. Why do the authorities persist? They see the bodies piling up. They hear the reports from the guards and the physicians' apprentices like you. Why do they allow this to continue? Historians of the future will debate this very question. Was it a genuine, if spectacularly misguided, belief in the medical science of their day? Was it a case of catastrophic bureaucratic inertia? An inability to admit that a major public policy, once set in motion, was a failure? Or was it, perhaps, that they simply had no other ideas in the face of a terrifying and incomprehensible phenomenon? The illusion of taking action, any action, is often preferable to the terrifying admission of complete and utter helplessness. The dark humor of the situation is a poison in your own mind. Your master has become the most prolific, if accidental, killer in the history of Strasbourg. He is curing his patients to death, and the city is paying him for it. The job of official musician for the dancing plague has become the most depressing occupation in the city. With a higher turnover rate than the gravediggers, the end of this disastrous chapter comes not from a change of heart, but from a complete and undeniable collapse of the system. The sheer number of dead and dying becomes impossible to manage, impossible to ignore. The spectacle is no longer a contained, organized event. It is a spiraling, public catastrophe. The city council and the guildmasters finally act. They have seen enough. They have seen that the cure is more deadly than the disease. You are standing in the grain market square. It is late afternoon. The sun is a merciless, white-hot disk in the sky. On the stage, nearly 400 people are still moving. A great, heaving, groaning mass of human suffering. The air is thick with the stench of sweat, of sickness, of despair. Then, a group of city guards marches into the square. They are led by the chief magistrate himself. He walks to the edge of the stage, his face a grim, stony mask. He holds up his hand, and he gives a signal. Clear order to the musicians. Stop! The drummer, his face slick with his own sweat, looks at the magistrate, then at your master. A question in his eyes. The magistrate nods firmly. The drummer slowly puts down his sticks. The piper lowers his pipe, and for the first time in weeks, the relentless, maddening music that has haunted the city day and night falls silent. The effect is immediate and profound. The sudden silence is more shocking than any noise. The dancers on the stage do not stop immediately. Their bodies, so long accustomed to the driving rhythm, continue to twitch and jerk for a few moments, like puppets with their strings suddenly cut. Then, one by one, they begin to falter. They stumble. And then, as if in a single coordinated movement, they begin to collapse. The stage becomes a field of fallen bodies, a great tangled heap of exhausted, broken humanity. Dr. Magnus cries out in protest. No, you will kill them all? The humor will be trapped, but no one is listening to him anymore. The chief magistrate turns to him, his eyes cold with contempt. You are dismissed, doctor, he says. Your science has failed. Your cure is a greater plague than the one it was meant to treat. Your master stares, his mouth agape, his face a ruin of shattered pride and public humiliation. His great experiment is over. You stand there, in the eerie, ringing silence of the square, surrounded by the moaning, twitching, and utterly broken bodies of the dancers. The great medical solution, the pride of the city's rational minds, has been a complete and catastrophic failure. The magistrates, terrified and out of all other options, turn their gaze away from the failed science of man. They look up, past the rooftops of the marketplace, to the single, soaring stone spire of the great cathedral. They have tried to solve this problem with their minds. Now, they will be forced to try and solve it with their souls. The age of reason is over. The age of divine wrath is about to begin. The sudden silence in the grain market is more terrifying than the music ever was. The relentless beat that had become the city's deranged heartbeat is gone, leaving behind only the sound of ragged, desperate gasps in the soft, shuffling scrape of feet that do not yet know how to stop. The great medical experiment, your master's magnum opus, has ended in catastrophic, undeniable failure. You watch as Dr. Magnus is publicly dismissed, his face a mask of shattered pride and disbelief. He stumbles away from the stage, a man whose entire worldview, whose very identity as a man of reason, has been destroyed in a single public humiliation. He retreats to his study, and you know, with a grim certainty, that he will not emerge again. The city has lost its faith in the science of man, and now it turns its desperate, terrified gaze toward the science of God. The city magistrates and the guild masters, now completely adrift. Do what men of power always do when their own authority fails, they defer to a higher one. They summon the highest-ranking priest from the great cathedral. The crisis is no longer a matter for physicians. It is a matter for theologians. You, now an apprentice without a master, a man with a uniquely intimate knowledge of the city's failed experiment. Become a quiet observer of this new chapter in the madness. You watch as the city's leadership, having wholeheartedly embraced a flawed medical theory, now pivots with the same desperate conviction to a spiritual one. The priests offer their diagnosis. This is not a natural disease of the blood. They declare, that was the prideful error of secular men. This, they announce, is a supernatural affliction, It is a divine curse, a punishment from an angry saint who has been offended by the sins of the city of Strasbourg, its pride, its greed, its lack of piety, and they give the sickness a name that will echo in the annals of medical curiosities for centuries to come. They call it the Saint Vitus's dance. You learn the story of this saint. Vitus was a young Christian martyr during the time of the Roman emperors. He became the patron saint of dancers, actors, and entertainers. But he also held a darker power. It was believed that those who angered him, who failed to show him proper reverence, could be cursed by him with an uncontrollable convulsive dance, epilepsy, neurological disorders, and all forms of manic. Involuntary movement fell under his divine and vengeful jurisdiction. The explanation fits the terrifying symptoms perfectly. It provides a narrative, a cause, and, most importantly, a potential cure. The people of Strasbourg seize upon it with the fervor of the desperate. It makes more sense to them than your master's arcane theories about humors and vapors. They understand the anger of a saint. They understand the concept of sin and punishment. The debate about the origin of this diagnosis will linger for centuries among scholars. Was the theory of Saint Vitus's curse a calculated, top-down decision by the church authorities? A way to reassert their own power and provide a theological framework for a frightening event? Or was it a pre-existing folk belief? A superstition that had been whispered among the peasants for generations, that now bubbled up to the surface and was officially adopted by the desperate leadership. Watching the relief on the faces of the magistrates as they embrace this new explanation, you suspect it is a bit of both, and so, a new course of treatment is prescribed. The city, which just a week ago was a great open-air dance-a-thon, is now transformed into a great open-air cathedral of penance. The first step is prayer. Public masses are held. The great bells of the cathedral, which had been silent, now tolled day and night, calling the citizens to prayer, to confession, to atonement. The few surviving dancers, who have been moved from the now dismantled stage to the cool stone floor of a nearby church, are no longer patients. They are the accursed, the living symbols of the city's sins. The new cure is an exercise in spiritual remedy. Priests are sent to the dancers. They do not take their pulse or examine their feet. They perform exorcisms, shouting in Latin, commanding the demonic or saintly power that possesses the dancers to depart. They sprinkle them with holy water. They press crucifixes to their foreheads. You watch a priest trying to cure a woman who is still convulsing on the floor by loudly reading the gospel at her. It seems to have about as much effect as your master's prescriptions of strengthening cordials. Small wooden amulets, hastily carved with the image of Saint Vitus, are produced and sold by the church. They are hung around the necks of the afflicted. A new kind of spiritual pomander meant to appease the angry saint. The city has simply traded one set of expensive, useless remedies for another. These for you, with your now useless medical training, are a ghost in this new world of faith-based healing. You visit your master, Dr. Magnus. In his study, he is a broken man. He sits in the dark, surrounded by his great books, which he now sees as monuments to his own foolishness. He refuses to speak. He simply stares at the wall. A man whose entire rational world has been shattered by a mystery he could not solve. You feel a profound pity for him. His error was not in his method, but in his certainty. You spend your days watching the new treatments unfold. You see a procession of flagellants, a local version of the ones you have heard stories about, marching through the streets, whipping their own backs to atone for the sins of the city. The atmosphere in Strasbourg is now one of profound, almost hysterical piety, but the dancing does not stop. The prayers do not work. The exorcisms fail. The people, though no longer being forced to dance on a stage, continue to twitch and jerk in their manic, private worlds, and they continue to die. The death toll is lower, now that they are not being actively encouraged to dance themselves to death. but they are still dying of exhaustion, of dehydration, of heart failure. The city authorities, having seen both the scientific and the spiritual cures fail, are now at the absolute end of their wits. Their city is still plagued by this terrifying, incomprehensible mania. Their authority has been shattered. Their trade has ground to a halt. They are desperate, and so they arrive at their third and final solution. It is a solution born of pure desperation. It is a solution that is neither medical nor spiritual. It is a solution of simple, brutal banishment. If the dancers cannot be cured here in Strasbourg, then they must be taken to the source of the curse itself. The priests have identified the great shrine of St. Vitus, high in the Vosges Mountains, a few days' journey from the city, as the epicenter of his power. The new plan is this: the remaining dancers will be rounded up, and they will be sent on a forced pilgrimage to the shrine to plead for the saint's forgiveness at his own altar. The decision is announced by the town crier. It is presented as a final, great act of public piety, a holy quest. But you see it for what it truly is. It is an act of exile. The city is not trying to cure its afflicted citizens anymore. It is simply trying to get rid of them, to move the problem outside the city walls, to banish the terrifying, inexplicable spectacle from their sight. You watch as the final stage of the city's response begins. Large wooden wagons are brought into the city square. The remaining dancers, now numbering in the low hundreds, are gathered. They are a pathetic, ragged, and still twitching assembly. They are no longer strong enough to walk for miles, so they must be transported. They are loaded onto the wagons like sacks of blighted grain. Their families weep, saying goodbye to their loved ones as they are sent on this strange and hopeless journey. You stand in the square, a silent, powerless observer. You have witnessed the complete and utter failure of both the science and the religion of your time. You have seen a city, faced with a mystery it could not comprehend, resort to a series of increasingly desperate and irrational solutions. You watch as the first wagon, laden with its cargo of endlessly, weakly, twitching human misery, begins to rumble its way out of the city gates, heading for the distant mountains. It is a pilgrimage of the damned. And you know, as you watch it go, that you are not watching a procession of hope. You are watching a funeral. The city of Strasbourg has exhausted its options. It has tried the science of medicine, and the result was a stage covered in the dead. It has tried the power of religion, and the prayers and exorcisms have proven as useless as the doctor's potions. All that is left is a city full of several hundred citizens who cannot stop dancing, and a leadership that is completely out of ideas. And so, they turn to their final, most desperate solution, a plan that is part medical evacuation, part religious quest, and part simple, brutal banishment. They decide to send the dancers on a forced pilgrimage. The new decree is announced by the town criers. The affliction has been declared the curse of St. Vitus. Therefore, the afflicted must be taken to the saint himself to beg for his forgiveness. The destination is a shrine dedicated to St. Vitus, hidden away in a cave in the Vosges Mountains. A few days' journey from the city, the pilgrimage is presented to the public as a great, unified act of civic piety, a final, desperate appeal to the heavens. You see it for what it really is. The city is not trying to cure its people anymore. It is trying to exile them. It is sweeping its most terrifying and inexplicable problem under the rug of a distant mountain range. You watch as the grim logistics of this holy quest are organized. The guilds are ordered to provide wagons and drivers. The church provides priests to accompany the procession and lead the prayers. The city guard is tasked with rounding up the dancers. You, the physician's apprentice without a master, a man whose scientific worldview has been shattered, decide to follow them. You are compelled by a morbid sense of responsibility. You were there at the beginning, when Frau Trophea first began her lonely jig. You feel you must be there at the end, to witness the final act of this bizarre and tragic play. The procession that leaves Strasbourg is one of the strangest and most pathetic sights you have ever witnessed. It is a long, slow-moving train of rough farm carts, rumbling over the city's cobblestones. And in the back of these carts are the dancers. They are no longer strong enough to walk for miles. So they must be transported like livestock. They are a wretched cargo of humanity. They are gaunt, their bodies wasted by weeks of non-stop exertion and near starvation. Their fine clothes are in tatters. Their feet are bandaged, bloody rags. And they are still moving, even as they lie or sit in the lurching, rattling carts. Their bodies will not be still. Their limbs twitch and jerk. Their heads roll from side to side, their torsos undulate to a silent, internal rhythm. They are a wagon train of human convulsions. A pilgrimage of the damned. You walk behind the last cart. A silent, anonymous observer. As the procession leaves the city gates, a great, collective wail goes up from the family members who have gathered to watch their loved ones be taken away. They know, as you know, that many of these pilgrims will not be coming back. The journey into the mountains is slow and arduous. The summer heat of the plain gives way to the cool, clean, pine-scented air of the Vosges. The change in the environment seems to have a subtle effect on the dancers. The cool air seems to soothe their fevers. The quiet of the forest seems to calm their frantic energy. The jerking and twitching lessens, just slightly, after 3 days of travel. The procession arrives at the shrine of St. Vitus, near the town of Saverne. It is not a grand cathedral, it is a small, remote chapel, built at the mouth of a dark, damp cave. A place that has been considered holy since long before the time of the Christians. The air here is cold, and the only sound is the dripping of water from the cave roof. It is a place of deep, primal superstition. And here, the final, bizarre cure is enacted. The priests who have accompanied the journey take charge. They have the dancers, or those who are still able to stand, brought before the entrance to the cave. A strange and specific ritual, passed down in the folklore surrounding the St. Vitus curse, is performed. The dancers must be shod in red shoes. A local cobbler has been hired, and you watch as he fits small, hastily made red leather shoes onto the battered, bleeding feet of the afflicted. Then, wearing their new red shoes, they are led into the grotto. Inside, in the flickering torchlight, is a small, crudely carved wooden statue of St. Vitus. The dancers are made to circle the statue, some stumbling, some being held up by the guards. The priests begin to chant a special mass, their Latin prayers echoing strangely in the damp. In closed space, they make offerings of bread and coin to the statue. They plead with the saint to lift his terrible curse. To grant these poor souls peace from their torment, it is a scene of intense, medieval, and desperate faith. It is the last resort of a world that has been confronted with something it cannot understand. And then a strange and inexplicable thing happens. It works as the Mass reaches its conclusion, as the final prayers echo off the damp rock. A quiet calm begins to descend upon the dancers. The frantic, convulsive twitching that has possessed their bodies for weeks begins to subside. A woman who had been jerking violently on the ground goes still. A man who had been endlessly shaking his head lets it fall onto his chest in what looks like simple, blessed exhaustion. One by one, the dancers stop dancing. They stand, or lie, in a state of utter bone-deep weariness. Their bodies finally, mercifully, at rest. A great, collective sigh of relief seems to pass through the grotto. The priests declare it a miracle. The saint has heard their prayers, he has accepted their penance, and he has lifted his curse. You stand at the back of the cave, watching this unfold, and you are faced with the final, unanswerable mystery of the entire ordeal. What have you just witnessed? Was it truly a miracle? Did the spirit of a long-dead Christian martyr, angered by the sins of a distant city, truly inflict this madness? And was he now appeased by this ritual of prayer and red shoes? Or was it something else? something more human. Was it the power of mass suggestion, the inverse of the hysteria that started the plague? Did the dancers' profound, shared belief that this ritual would cure them actually have the power to do so? Was it a kind of psychological exorcism? Their minds finally letting go of the mania in this dramatic, final, and cathartic ceremony? Or was it, perhaps, even simpler than that, had the affliction, the mass psychogenic illness, simply run its natural course had the fever of the mind finally broken, after weeks of burning through its fuel, and did this final dramatic ritual just happened to be the thing that was occurring at the moment? The disease finally ended on its own. This remains the great, unresolved debate about the dancing plague of 1518. The cure seemed to work, but no one, not then and not 500 years in the future, can say with any certainty exactly why. You watch as the survivors of the plague are tended to. They are not cured, not in the way a man with a broken leg is cured. They are shattered. They are skeletal, malnourished, and in a state of profound emotional and physical shock. They are the veterans of a war fought entirely within their own bodies, but they are still, and they are alive. You do not stay to see the slow, triumphant return of the survivors to Strasbourg. Your journey is over. You have seen the beginning, the middle, and now the strange, ambiguous end. You turn your back on the shrine of St. Vitus, on the hushed, miraculous quiet of the grotto, and you begin your own long, lonely walk back to the city. You are returning to a city that has been traumatized, that has been humbled, that has seen its own civic and scientific certainties crumble into dust. You are returning a different man than the one who first watched Frau Trophea from the window of his master's study. You are a man who has seen that the world contains mysteries that cannot be explained by the elegant logic of the four humors, or by the simple piety of the church. You are a man who has learned that sometimes. The most terrifying plagues are the ones that begin not in the blood, but in the mind. The dance is over, but the mystery, will haunt you for the rest of your life. Your walk back to Strasbourg is a journey through a world that seems, on the surface, to have returned to normal. The fields are green, the forests are quiet, and the small villages you pass through are going about their business. But you are a changed man, and you now see the world through changed eyes. The quiet of the countryside no longer feels peaceful. It feels fragile, as if it is merely a thin veil drawn over a deep and primal chaos. You have been to the mountain shrine and have witnessed a miracle, or a mass delusion, or a simple coincidence. You do not know what you saw, and that not knowing is a heavier burden than any certainty. When you arrive back at the city gates of Strasbourg, you find a city that is trying desperately to forget. The frantic, hysterical energy of the past 2 months is gone. It has been replaced by a strange, exhausted, and almost sullen silence. The city is like a person who has woken up after a long and terrible fever dream, and is now deeply, profoundly embarrassed by the things they did and said while in their delirium. You walk through the streets that were once the stage for the great dancing mania. The crowds are gone. The sounds of the pipers and drummers are a ghost in your memory. The city is simply quiet. People go about their daily tasks, their faces grim and averted. They do not make eye contact. They do not speak of what has happened. It is a collective, unspoken agreement. The summer of the dancing plague is over, and no one wants to be reminded of it. You go to the grain market, the place that was the epicenter of the city's disastrous cure, the great wooden stage, the altar upon which dozens of your fellow citizens were sacrificed to a flawed medical theory, has been dismantled. There is no trace of it left. The workmen have been so thorough that it is as if it never existed. The city is scrubbing away the evidence of its own folly. The Tanner's Guildhall, which had been used as an indoor dancing space, has been aired out and scrubbed with vinegar and rosemary. The guild is holding its meetings there again, pretending that its floor was not. just a few weeks ago, covered with the writhing, exhausted bodies of the afflicted. This is how a city heals. You realize not by examining its wounds, but by pretending they were never there. You begin to hear news of the survivors of the pilgrimage, a few at a time. They begin to trickle back into the city. They are not welcomed with a parade. There are no services of thanksgiving held in the cathedral for their miraculous recovery. They are met with a quiet, fearful, and deeply awkward shuffle of social embarrassment. These survivors are now marked people. They are the living reminders of the madness that the city is so desperate to forget. You see one of them in the market, a woman you remember seeing on the stage. Her movements once so frantic. Now she is still, but she is not whole. She walks with a slight, permanent tremor in her hands. Her eyes have the same vacant, haunted look you saw when she was in the grip of the mania. Her neighbors shun her. They cross the street to avoid her. She is a ghost from a nightmare that everyone has agreed to pretend was just a bad dream. You think of your old master, Dr. Magnus. You go to his house, but the shutters are closed, the door barred. A neighbor tells you that he has not been seen in weeks. He is a recluse, a man broken by his own public failure. His science, his great and certain art, was proven to be a catastrophic failure, and he cannot face the city that once revered him. His story is one of the quiet, personal tragedies left in the plague's wake. You are now an apprentice without a master, a student of a science you no longer believe in. What is your place in this new, quiet world? You find yourself drawn to the great cathedral library, a place of stillness and ancient knowledge. You begin to read, not the medical texts of Galen, but the works of the philosophers, the theologians, the poets. You are searching for a different kind of explanation for what you have witnessed, a truth that cannot be found in a urine flask or a medical chart. You watch as the official story of the dancing plague is written. You see the city's chroniclers at work, and you realize that another kind of healing is taking place, the healing of the historical record. The event is being minimized, downplayed. The official chronicles will record a brief. Strange outbreak of St. Vitus's dance. A minor affliction that affected a few dozen people and was quickly cured by a pious pilgrimage. The hundreds of deaths. The disastrous medical mismanagement. The citywide panic these things are being quietly erased from the official narrative. The city is not just forgetting its trauma, it is rewriting it. This is a profound question that future historians will face. How does a society deal with a trauma that is not just tragic, but also deeply, profoundly bizarre and shameful? Do they build monuments to it, as they would to a war or a great fire, or do they sweep it under the carpet of history, where it becomes a strange, unexplained footnote? A historical curiosity that defies easy explanation. Strasbourg, it seems, has chosen the latter. The city has a reputation for order, for piety, for prosperity. A mass hysterical event where its leaders prescribed a cure that killed its own citizens does not fit that self-image. And so, the story must be changed. The humor of the situation, if it can be called that, is a dark and deeply ironic one. Just a month ago, the city was in the grip of a wild, city-sponsored dance party from hell. Now, everyone is pretending it was just a minor local disturbance. A bit of high-spiritedness that got out of hand. It is the most aggressive and successful case of collective amnesia you have ever witnessed. One day, you are in the marketplace and you see her. It is Frau Trophea, or you think it is her. It is hard to be sure. The woman who stands before a baker's stall is thin, and her face is etched with lines of hardship. She moves slowly, deliberately, with a stillness that seems almost unnatural, as if she is consciously holding her body in check. She catches your eye for a moment, and you see a flicker of recognition, of a shared, terrible memory. And then she looks away, gathers her loaf of bread, and shuffles off into the crowd. just another anonymous citizen. Her fate, like the true cause of the plague, remains a mystery. You are left with your own memories, your own quiet and unresolved trauma. You have witnessed the failure of both science and religion in the face of the inexplicable. You have seen how a city, a society, can be seized by a madness that has no discernible cause. And you have seen how that same society can choose to heal itself by simply deciding to forget. You stand in the empty grain market. On the spot where the great stage of death once stood, the sun is setting, casting a warm, golden light over the city. The sounds are normal now, the chatter of the market winding down, the distant cry of a boatman on the river, the evening bells of the cathedral beginning to ring. It is all so peaceful, so orderly. It is as if the summer of dancing never happened, but you were there. You remember. You are a living witness to a madness that the world has already begun to turn into a strange and unbelievable story. The plague is over, but the silence it has left behind is filled with unanswered questions. And you know they will haunt you for the rest of your days. The years that follow the summer of the dancing plague are years of slow, quiet healing. The city of Strasbourg licks its wounds. The famine recedes. The memory of the dancing, while never truly gone, is buried under the steady, reassuring weight of ordinary life. The city chooses to forget its moment of madness, but you do not. You cannot. The bizarre and terrifying events of 1518 have irrevocably shaped the course of your life. You become a physician. After the death of your master, Dr. Magnus, who lived out his last years as a recluse, a man broken by his own certainty. You complete your studies with another, more humble teacher. You earn your doctorate. You are no longer the apprentice. You are the master. You set up your own practice in the very same house, in the very same study where you once watched Frau Trophea begin her terrible, lonely dance. But you are a different kind of physician than Dr. Magnus was. The dancing plague was your true teacher, and it taught you the most profound and difficult lessons of your profession. The first lesson was humility. You never again allow yourself the luxury of absolute certainty. You remember your master, so confident in his diagnosis of hot blood, so sure of his catastrophic cure. And you have learned that the human body and the human mind are far more complex and mysterious than the elegant. Ordered theories in your books would suggest, when a patient comes to you with a baffling ailment, you are not afraid to say the 3 wisest words any physician can learn: I do not know. The second lesson was observation. You learned that true knowledge comes not just from reading the ancient texts of Galen, but from quietly, patiently, and compassionately observing the patient in front of you. You learn to listen, not just to their descriptions of their physical pains, but to the stories of their lives, their fears, their sorrows. You begin to see the intricate, undeniable connection between the health of the spirit and the health of the body. You understand now that the people of Strasbourg in that terrible summer were not suffering from hot blood. They were suffering from a sickness of the soul, a deep and collective trauma born of hunger, disease, and a terrifying uncertainty about the very nature of God and their world. Their strange, frantic dancing was not a symptom of a fever. It was a symptom of their despair. You spend your long life practicing this new, quieter kind of medicine. You become known in Strasbourg as a wise and gentle physician, a man who is more likely to prescribe a week of rest and a nourishing broth than an expensive and violent purge. You still practice the medicine of your time. You still believe in the humors. You still prescribe herbal remedies, but you do so with a new and profound awareness of its limitations. You spend many of your quiet evenings in your study, reading, thinking, trying to find an explanation for the madness you witnessed in your youth. You read other accounts of similar phenomena. You learned that the dancing plague of 1518, while perhaps the most famous, was not unique. You read of other dancing manias that had erupted sporadically in the towns along the Rhine River for centuries. Smaller outbreaks of the same strange, compulsive dancing you learn of a similar affliction in Italy called tarantism, where people believe the bite of a tarantula spider could only be cured by dancing wildly to a specific kind of music. You sift through all the theories, the physical and the supernatural. Was it a poison? The ergot fungus on the rye is a compelling explanation, but it does not fully account for the contagious, suggestible nature of the dancing you saw with your own eyes. Was it the curse of a saint you have seen the power of faith? But you cannot bring yourself to believe in a God who would inflict such a bizarre and drawn-out torment. In the end, after a lifetime of study and reflection, you were left with the same conclusion you began to form as a young apprentice. It was a perfect storm, a city weakened by famine, terrified of disease, and spiritually adrift in a time of great religious turmoil. A population so steeped in anxiety and despair that their collective psyche simply broke. It was a plague of the mind, a fever of the soul, and the dancing was its strange and terrible symptom. This is the modern diagnosis of mass psychogenic illness, and you, with your 16th century knowledge, have arrived at its very doorstep. The city around you changes, the world changes. The great wave of the Protestant Reformation, which was just a tremor in 1518, washes over Strasbourg, changing its religious and political life forever. New wars are fought, new plagues, more conventional and more deadly, come and go, and the dancing plague becomes a strange, half-forgotten local legend. A bizarre footnote in the city's history that is mostly dismissed as a peasant superstition. You become an old man. Your hair is white. Your hands are spotted with age. Your own apprentices are now respected physicians themselves. One evening, you are sitting in your study. The same study. Looking out the same window. It is a warm summer evening. Much like the one when it all began, one of your young apprentices comes to you. He is troubled. He tells you of a strange case he has just seen in the poor quarter of the city. A young woman, he says, who has been suffering from fits, from convulsions, from strange, involuntary movements that none of the usual remedies can touch. The family fears she is possessed. The apprentice looks at you, his eyes full of the earnest, confident desire to find a neat, scientific diagnosis. Master, he asks, what do you think it is? What is the cause? You look at the young man, and you see yourself, all those years ago, so sure that every ailment had a clear cause and a logical cure. You look out the window at the city of Strasbourg, peaceful in the evening light. You think of Frau Trophea, of the stage in the grain market, of the pilgrimage to the mountain shrine. You could offer him a theory. You could speak of the humors, of the passions, of the delicate balance of the mind and the body. But you have learned a deeper wisdom than that. You slowly get to your feet, your old bones aching. I do not know what it is. You say to your apprentice, your voice quiet and clear, but let us go to her. Let us sit with her, and let us listen. You have come full circle. You have replaced the arrogant certainty of your youth with a profound and humble acceptance of the world's great mysteries. The plague has taught you that the most important part of healing is not always in knowing the answer, but in having the courage to admit that you do not, and to simply be present in the face of suffering. This is your final, hard-won piece of wisdom. This is the true legacy of the dancing plague. The old physician and his young apprentice walk out into the twilight of the 16th century city. Leaving the quiet study behind, they are going not with a cure, but with a question, an offering of simple, compassionate presence. Let the image of them. 2 generations of healers walking into the mystery of a patient's suffering. Be the final image of our story. Let the strange, frantic music of the dancing plague fade completely, replaced by the gentle, peaceful rhythm of your own breathing. The story is over. The mystery is at rest. And now it is time for you to be at rest as well. Feel the world of Strasbourg, with its timbered houses and its great cathedral. Dissolve into the familiar. comforting darkness of your own room. The anxieties of the past, the fevers of the soul, have no place here. This space is one of calm, of safety, of profound and easy peace. Your own bed is a sanctuary, and your only task now is to surrender to its comfort. Your breathing is the only rhythm that matters now. A slow, deep, and steady tide, pulling you gently away from the shore of the waking world. With each breath, feel the last remnants of the day's tension leave your body. Feel your muscles grow heavy and wonderfully limp. Feel your mind grow quiet, its thoughts softening, becoming as distant and as harmless as the stars in a far-off sky. There is nothing to solve, nothing to understand. There is only the simple, healing act of letting go. Allow the gentle darkness to hold you. Allow the quiet to soothe you. You are safe, you are comfortable, and you are ready for a deep and dreamless sleep.